God, I'm absolutely starving. I am absolutely starving, Michael.
Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and memory fragmentation. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at Possessor. This 2020 sci-fi psychological horror takes place in an alternate 2008 in which people and technology are far more intertwined. We follow an assassin named Voss who is able to implant her mind inside others to carry out her hits. She's conducting a high-profile murder when her host begins fighting back and the two struggle for power in life and in their conjoined minds. Possessor was written and directed by Brandon Cronenberg, who has brought us Antiviral and a few horror shorts. As you may have guessed, Brandon is the son of David Cronenberg, and it seems he is following in his father's bizarre footsteps. The film stars Andrea Riseborough from Oblivion and Mandy as assassin Tasia Voss, Christopher Abbott from Sleepwalker and It Comes as Night as Colin Tate, the man Voss takes over, Jennifer Jason Leigh from Miami Blues and Annihilation as Girder, Voss's supervisor, and Sean Bean from The Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones as John Parse, Voss's ultimate target. Possessor is a visual and audible feast for the eyes and ears, and it's clear so much work went into the filming and post-production. The cinematography was handled by Kareem Hussan, who has also captured Hobo with a Shotgun, Firestarter, and the upcoming Orphan First Kill. The film was edited by Matthew Hanam from Enemy and Sensitive Skin, and the score was composed by Jim Williams from Raw and Kill List. Oh, it also has some wild gore, most of which is done with practical effects made by Dan Martin and his team at 13 Finger FX. Possessor premiered at Sundance and had a small theatrical release in the US, the UK, and Canada, but it didn't seem it was a big moneymaker. It was met with positive reviews from critics though, who praised its technical aspects, its unique story, and its unrelenting brutality. It currently has a 94 and 59% on Rotten Tomatoes, so something about Possessor was harder for general audiences to swallow. I had noticed Possessor's badass poster on streaming services for a while, but I never got around to watching it, so thank you to my patron, the 4 Mood Groups, for requesting it for me to review. Put on your VR headsets for this one, folks, cause we're watching Possessor. The movie opens with a woman named Holly plugging some kind of needle into her fucking skull, and as she powers it up, her expressions range from laughing, crying, to deadly serious. Holly joins her fellow hostesses at a fancy hotel bar. She takes a moment to admire some steak knives, and she immediately uses one to stab a man in the neck. She proceeds to stab him dozens of times as the terrified partygoers flee, and she revels in the bloody good job she has done. She removes a pistol from her handbag and tells someone to pull her out before placing it in her mouth, but she finds herself unable to pull the trigger. She seems to have an internal struggle as a bunch of cops approach, and when Holly points her gun at them, she is riddled with bullets. Tasia Voss is removed from this weird bird-looking helmet, and a technician confirms the host is dead as she vomits. Voss and her supervisor Girder perform a debriefing in which she looks over items to determine if her mind has made a stable transition back to her body. She recognizes her grandfather's pipe as well as a butterfly she mounted as a child. She still feels guilt over killing it, and Girder says all her results are coming back normally. She notices Voss seems out of it though, and asks if there were any anomalies while inside Holly, but Voss assures her she is fine. Girder says their next big contract is almost finalized, but Voss requests to take some time off to spend with her family. Girder reminds her that she and her husband Michael are separated, including a previous discussion where Voss said she'd become a danger to him and their son Ira. She takes time off nonetheless, and she vapes outside their apartment and practices lines to say during her visit, and it becomes pretty clear Michael does not know what she does for a living. Voss watches a news story about her murder as Holly, and Ira shows her his weird-ass dancing robot. She awkwardly sits through a dinner party until she requests Michael ask the guests to leave, and then they get to fucking. Voss is too busy thinking about stabbing to enjoy herself, though. She calls up Girder to say she's ready for work, and she tells Michael she's been called for a last-minute trip. Michael wants her to move back in, but her bloody visions tell me that won't be happening. Voss, sniffs her son before leaving in the night, and Girder complains about her aging body. She was once an assassin as well, but she can no longer take the strain of the machine. Voss is meant to be her long-term replacement, but Girder worries she hasn't completely moved on from her old life. She says it only takes one tiny thought to turn into a fracture while inside someone else, and she asks why Voss stabbed her last victim instead of using her standard pistol. Voss said it seemed more in character and reassures Girder that this is what she wants. Her next host is a man named Colin Tate. He is dating the daughter of John Parse, the CEO of the largest data mining operation outside the US. His stepson Reed is looking to have both John and his daughter taken out by Colin, under the guise that Colin feels belittled by his new job and potential father-in-law. He eventually snaps and kills them both, as well as himself, and the stepson can inherit John's fortune. Girder says their real target is John's company Zoothru, as once they own Reed, they will essentially own the data he collects. Voss watches Colin and Ava as they discuss doing some coke, and she mimics his lines the way she practices her own dialogue. Her arm begins throbbing with pain, and sometime later Colin finds himself sedated in the back of a van. He was kidnapped heading to the airport for a trip, and they begin prepping his body to host Voss's mind. As the crew implants some kind of receiver into his brain, Girder runs through the objectives of her mission. She is to spend the first 2 days establishing that Colin is losing stability in front of witnesses, and then to kill John and Ava at a dinner party the former is hosting. They have to be killed at this party due to Voss's and Colin's brain compatibility, so she has to exit his body by the end of the 3rd day if she doesn't want to risk permanent brain damage. Both bodies are prepped, and the jump she makes into Colin's mind is a surprisingly trippy, stroby, melty affair. She awakens in Colin's body next to Ava, and she quietly adjusts to her new host and her new genitalia. She gives Ava some good morning kisses, and she notices he's in a good mood. She didn't hear him come in last night, which also makes me wonder who put his unconscious body in the bed before Voss woke up inside him. Voss notices what I can only describe as a speck, but when she catches it, it vanishes. She heads to work at Zoothru, where Colin is one of the many people mining data. She is greeted by Colin's sleazy friend Eddie, and this week Colin is researching curtains and blinds. That means he is literally sitting in an empty room with a bunch of other people wearing VR headsets, all of whom are spying on people through their phones, security systems, and webcams to learn about the items they are buying. Look at all those curtains. What useful information this must be to somebody. Voss starts getting a headache hearing distorted voices and seeing that damn speck again. She starts seeing flashes of various visions from her life and the melty mind world, and it seems like Colin is looking back at her. She wakes up on the floor to Girder's concerned calls, but she once again denies that anything concerning is happening. She runs into Eddie in the bathroom, who points out he is top of the list for an extra weekend shift, presumably because John isn't keen on his employees banging his daughter. She returns home and watches Michael and Ira from outside before returning to Colin's home, and he is so late that Ava almost called the cops. She invites him to do a line with her friends, who describe the mine, the floor that Colin works on, as little more than a sweatshop. Ava says her father tends to torture her lovers, and Voss sees a picture of Colin and asks who it is an image of. Ava's friend Rita walks in on him in the bathroom, and it seems they have some sort of prior relationship she would like to start up again. The girlies go home, and Ava asks what's going on with him, and she worries his job at Zoothru is messing with his head. Girl, if you only knew. Voss plays her usual everything is fine line, and she says he is just tired and that he loves her. That gets Colin some sexy time, and Voss gets pretty into it before things get all flashy again. She even envisions herself with Colin's dick. She contacts Girder the next morning, who says their analysis has been coming up with strange reports. Voss says she is confidently in control of the host, and the dinner party is tonight, so she'll be out soon anyway. It's time to recalibrate her settings, which is what we saw her do in the opening. This is essentially Voss tuning her emotions to Colin's body to ensure proper impersonation. Colin and Ava arrive at John's dinner party, who caps off the evening with a promise for exciting new innovation at Zoo-Thru. It's time for Colin to meet the man himself, and Mr. Parse is indeed a pompous, demeaning asshole to his daughter and her boyfriend. Voss slips away to speak with Gerder, who tells her to get in a fight with John and publicly thrown out of the party. After the party, she is to sneak back inside and kill him and Ava. She drunkenly wanders up to John and demands an apology for earlier, and when he doesn't give one, she grabs him. She ends up punching one of his buddies, and yeah, that gets you thrown out of a party. Voss waits until the party's over to head back inside, but instead of using the pistol she was issued, she goes for the damn fire poker. Ava and John express their displeasure with each other before she goes to bed, and Colin sits down and presents the gun. John tells him to get out of his house as he goes to bed, but when he lunges for the gun, Voss slashes his neck with the fire poker. She beats the crap out of him with it for a very long time and then jams the thing into his mouth. Ava walks in on this brutality and gets shot before running away, and Voss uses the poker to bust out John's teeth and stab him in the eye. She follows Ava's blood trail, who didn't get very far, and coldly shoots her in the back of the head. With the job done, Voss tells Gerder to pull her out, but once again she can't seem to pull the trigger. The melty place starts flashing as Colin and Voss crudely separate, and it seems Colin is back in control. He grabs a shard of glass and stabs the implant in his head, and back at the lab, Voss begins coughing up blood. Gerder says not to pull her out as the terrified Colin runs from the mansion through the busy streets until morning. He snags some clothes from a donation drop site, and Gerder learns from the technicians that Colin is now the dominant force in the body. There is a lot of bleed through, meaning the two are experiencing memories and current events somewhat together, and Gerder refuses to pull Voss out despite the brain damage she is receiving. Colin removes shards of glass from his head as he replays the events of last night, and he has no idea why he killed Ava and John. He gets a phone call from Gerder, but he quickly hangs up and keeps moving. He realizes he is being followed by a pair of men, and he starts having visions of Voss's family. He shows up at Rita's apartment talking like a madman, but upon Rita's confusion, he pretends he tripped and bumped his noggin. Rita is about to leave town for a couple days, and she allows Colin to stay at her place when he says he and Ava had a bad fight. He finds himself practicing lines that Voss usually says to her family, and that may be because she is back in control. She enters the bathroom and points the gun at Rita, but before we see what happens, we overhear a news story saying that John somehow survived his attack. Colin is back to his old self again and is surprised to find Eddie at the door, as he claims Rita told him to come check up on him. Colin buys his story and turns his back on Eddie, allowing him to knock him out with some sort of electrical doodad. He begins recalibrating Colin's brain as he too works for Gerder's company. He tells Voss he has suppressed Colin's will, so she should be good to go in shooting herself. Voss is still delusional and grabs her gun, but Eddie re-explains everything and gains her trust. She asks him to pull the trigger, as she still can't force Colin to do so though. Eddie is a good Christian and can't bring himself to, but he ensures she has complete control right now. He recalibrates her again, but some sort of pulse analysis allows Colin to become aware of Voss's presence within him. He starts strangling her before popping her head like a balloon, which kicks off my favorite sequence of the movie. He puts on her face like a cheap rubber mask, and he envisions himself reenacting the various events we've seen thus far. This gives him insight into where Voss lives, and when Colin awakens, he finds Eddie shot to death. Oh, hey Rita. Colin tells Voss to go ahead and pull the trigger, but Colin's survival instinct is still a bit too powerful. He again envisions Voss's home and reiterates her familial greetings, which Voss is also whispering back at the lab. He makes his way to her apartment and even chit-chats with Ira in the creepiest way possible before Michael calls him back inside. He waits until nightfall to knock on the door, and when claiming to be a friend of Voss doesn't work, he pulls his gun and forces himself inside. He wants to know where he can find her, but poor Michael has no idea where she is. Colin goes on a fantastic tangential rant involving a parasitic worm controlling someone's mind and eventually being the presence its host's spouse is in love with instead of the host. He tells Voss to come out or he'll kill Michael, and she does successfully meet with him in his head. He asks what she has done to him, but she says that he's the one in control. She tells him that whether he believes it or not, he was a part in killing Ava. She tells him she used to love Michael too, but says to go ahead and kill him. Michael takes this moment to smack the gun out of Colin's hand, but before he can get a good shot, Colin grabs a cleaver and yeets 2 of his fingers off. Then, in typical Voss fashion, she chops Michael up until he's looking like the Kool-Aid Man. Voss, now in control again, tells Gerder to pull her out, but once again she can't pull the damn trigger. She starts sobbing before she is stabbed in the neck, and before she can even think, she shoots Ira in the torso. Ira takes the shot like a creepy champ, and Voss unloads a bunch of rounds into her son. Voss starts bleeding out as Gerder says "pull me out" from inside Ira, and their blood pools merge to create a butterfly shape. Both Gerder and Voss awaken in the lab, and we jump to their debriefing together. Voss once again recognizes her grandfather's pipe and her childhood butterfly, but she no longer feels guilt about killing it. And that puts a smile on Gerder's face to end the movie. And that's Possessor. This was a very pleasant surprise. First and foremost, this is a movie about identity, both in how we build them for ourselves and also how we build them for those around us. Voss has spent so much time within other people that she has lost touch with who she is. Tasia is just a profile that she occasionally puts on, but it is no longer her identity. She has to practice talking to her family the same way she practices impersonating others. From the start, she was pretty much just an empty shell with very few connections, and by the end, those connections are all gone. Gerder ultimately got exactly what she wanted. Voss has no family, no friends, nobody to turn to in her own life, so now she has nothing better to do than commit awful assassinations, and now she has no reason to feel any empathy or guilt over the people she kills. The only consistency within Voss's character is her dishonesty. Even when she is going through a shitstorm in her own head, Voss refuses to let Gerder know there is anything wrong. She is willing to lie and jeopardize the mission and her mind just for the sake of getting the job done. Her entire life with Michael is also built upon lies, as he literally doesn't know what she does for a living. Most of the other characters are built upon false identities as well. Gerder pretends to care about Voss when she is literally the most cold, dangerous person in the movie, and John has this whimsical, inspiring public persona, but up close he is a cruel, demeaning asshole to everyone he deems less than him. The film also ties into these themes with its use of technology. The exploration of VR and data mining tap into themes of privacy that are very relevant to conversations about apps selling information right now. And in the film, our cameras are direct portals for companies to watch us and learn our patterns. And this all ties back into the idea of manufacturing identity. Just as the companies buy data to build profiles for potential customers, Voss builds profiles for the next person she is going to possess. But just as Gerder somewhat explained, her personal connections were keeping her from completely consuming the people that were hosting her. She couldn't make Colin or Holly commit suicide, but she was in enough control to make them kill people. This also confirms what Tasia said to Colin at the end. Regardless of how in control she was, her vessels were willing enough to kill their targets. They didn't stop Voss mid-murder, they stopped her when their own lives were at risk. Colin wouldn't have done it on his own accord, but he had enough hate towards John and his daughter by association that he could not or would not stop Voss from attacking them. Andrea Riseborough and Christopher Abbott both give outstanding performances. They perfectly portray this cycle of being in control, being possessed, and being somewhere in between. I don't know why, but Abbott's eyes just look so sad to me, and it helps me feel really bad for Colin. I also love the cinematography and sound design, especially during those intense internal sequences. As you may have noticed, it's an incredibly violent film as well, but I feel all the brutality has a purpose within Possessor. It simultaneously illustrates Voss's growing instability and Colin's rage as he fights for his body back. It also helps in showcasing the trauma that these violent events have had on Voss, which definitely play a role in her growing instability. There are also a lot of thematic elements and visual cues that repeat throughout the movie. As Voss and Colin fight for control, they constantly repeat each other's lines. A lot of scenes either mirror the two or layer them on top of each other, and there are multiple scenes involving the speck and the butterfly. The speck, as I understand it, represents Voss's tiny, barely visible personal connections that still exist. When she finally makes contact with it, she really starts to spiral, ultimately letting Colin take control. And the butterfly essentially represents Voss's humanity, which she is ready to part with by the end of the film. All in all, Possessor is a tense, uncomfortable, compelling film. Its themes around identity and technology tie into a lot of contemporary concerns, but the visuals also pay homage to a bunch of sci-fi horror classics. Brandon definitely has some love for his father's films, and it's great to see him expanding on those aesthetics. Possessor has brutal violence, chilling visuals, fantastic performances, and a bleak-ass story that will leave you thinking about it. I'm definitely going to go check out Antiviral, and I'm definitely excited for whatever Brandon Cronenberg comes up with next. I can safely say that Possessor is one of my new favorite horror movies from the 2020s, if not my outright number one right now. I don't know how long it'll stay there, but it is currently the number one on my Letterboxd list for this decade. If you haven't seen Possessor, I 100% recommend it, and I also recommend you go follow me on Letterboxd. I'm creating top 100 lists for every decade. They're all still very in progress, but I'm slowly chugging along through them. Well, that's about it. Next week I'll finally be ranking all 5 Hannibal Lecter films. Thank you all for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Possessor. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews, and if you want to help support this channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks y'all.